Next segment. There's a large amount of mass here that needs to be removed, of course, but you can prioritize, and I'm going to be prioritizing where I'm going to remove first. It's always the ends first, and then you look toward the middle. So I think the end here should be a priority over removing this. So I'm going to remove this mass off the end here. But I'm going to be abrading all the way around, again, to save time so I don't have to keep putting this down, picking it up, putting it down, picking it up, to abrade each individual spot that I want to hit. Okay, and I'm opportunistic, so this is a good opportunity. I didn't modify it very much except for the abrading. Now, if it doesn't work, I'll need to be more careful about how I modify the edge, or modify the edge more extensively, or both. So that one worked pretty good. I'm getting used to the material as well, so I'm starting to get accustomed to what I can get away with. And most of the time when I say that I'm trying to get away with something, I'm trying to get away with not too much edge preparation. Let's see if that works. Yes. Now, I cannot predict the ending of the flakes very well, but I can predict the middle, and the middle was where the main part of the obstacle was, so I wasn't worried about the ending. In all the Flintknapping that I do, the hardest part is predicting the ending of the flake, so I never want to try to remove an obstacle with the ending of the flake. The obstacle is right here, basically. See how it's lumpy right there? I want that to be the middle of the flake. I don't want to take off a flake just barely long enough to remove that. I want to go past it because the middle of the flake is the most predictable. The least predictable is the ending. The next least predictable is the beginning. Believe it or not, the beginning is not very predictable. The middle, however, is the most predictable in my experience. Okay, so that's where I wanted to make sure that the obstacle was. I wanted to make sure the obstacle would be in the middle of that flake, which it is. Well, basically. All right, so the ending, I'm pretty sure I can get rid of that either by hitting directly on the step fracture or from the other side. Sometimes a combination of both. All right, so is the tip thinned down enough? I guess so. It's hard to say for sure exactly. But after thousands and thousands of hits and hundreds of points, it seems to be okay. Thin enough for me to hit the middle really, really hard without having to worry about this mass near the tip hanging out there and creating bending stresses when I hit the middle. I suppose you can develop some formulas for that, but they're going to have to be taking into account the hardness and brittleness of the material. So I don't concern myself too much with the physics of it. I just go by feel, like they used to back in the day. It's all by feel and by experience. And yes, I've already abraded many of these areas, and I'm abrading them over again. You might think that that wastes time, but they do need to be abraded a lot anyway, so it doesn't waste that much time. It does waste time if I don't abrade it initially as much as it should be abraded, so that I don't keep abrading it over and over. But just to be safe, I go over it again anyway, Even though I know that maybe some areas are already abraded enough, I'll just abrade it again anyway. Just so I don't have to think about it too much. I just go over the whole thing. So you may be curious as to why I keep abrading over and over. I'm just taking the easy way out and just doing it all just in case. But yeah, it saves time for me not to have to keep putting this down and picking it up, putting it down, picking it up. All right. Even though I may be re-abrading areas that I don't need to re-abrade. All right, so this is the next, I'm assuming that this is the next major obstacle, according to my experience, and not according to physics. So I'm going to attack this obstacle here with the strongest opportunity that I see, and I see a strong opportunity in this striking area right here, rather than this, rather than this one. See, this one has a weak striking area because it has a little dip. See a little dip compared to this striking area, which has no dip. It's a convexity. This one is a concavity. This one is weaker than this. They are both striking areas. They both will yield possible flakes into this area, but this one with a convexity on the surface is stronger than this one. I can probably generate a much fatter, stronger, longer flake with a surface that is slightly convex. And you have to make sure the underside is convex as well. Okay, there is an obstacle here where there's some what I call crunchiness, or little flakes that didn't complete from earlier hitting on that. There's step fractures and stuff, but I think I can blast through that. Only by experience, right? There's no formula. So no, it didn't blast through. Okay, so even where I thought it was going to be strong, it wasn't strong enough. So I have to make it stronger. How do I do that? I bring it back more. So I'm going to flake off more of the edge to bring the edge closer to the obstacle, and also to thicken up the edge. As you remove the edge, it gets thicker because the workpiece is thicker. If the workpiece was the same thickness, there is no real benefit in removing width other than getting close to the obstacle. There is no added benefit of it being thicker and stronger here. That will affect you when you're knapping slabs. I'll do an instructional video on the slabs in the future. I've done some videos already on knapping slabs, but none that are, purely instructional, I think. I'm not sure. But anyway, this is a much stronger striking area than before. It is much more convex, much thicker. As you can see, there's quite a bit of thickness on the edge. It's not a thin edge. It's not. This one is even a little bit sharp. This has no sharpness whatsoever. So I'm going to strike into the piece this way. Why don't I strike directly in? Because this already has some incipients. I would strike directly in this way, but it seems to be less opportunistic than if I were to strike here. So I'm going to strike here into that instead of here into this. Putting my flaker a little bit higher than I normally would, and higher than the last strike, and I'm going to hit it harder than the last strike. All because of experience and not the physics. It's just the way it feels. Okay. That was one of the hardest hits of the whole operation. Alright. Believe it or not, that hit was just as hard or harder than hits in the initial stages in the last segment. Okay. So it did work. is tending to want to dive at the end, which is it's worrisome because of the thinning. When it wants to dive toward the end, it's going to be difficult to thin if it's wide. I'll have to make it more narrow so that the flakes, they'll travel across most of the piece before diving. You don't want that dive to happen in the middle, because sometimes it'll also dive if you hit from the other side right in the middle, and you'll be left with a bunch of steps right in the middle. So I'm glad it traveled past the center. I'm also glad it didn't crack too much on this, because sometimes it'll crack a lot here when I hit really, really hard. Luckily it did not. I tend to want to remove the step fractures right away, so I can do that, I think, by striking on the other side. So I'm just preparing the edges for future strikes that I see. The more experience you get, the further ahead you can think. And I've already thought ahead a couple strikes. I'll take this flake, and then I'll take this flake, and I'll probably take this flake in that order. Alright, let's see. So that eliminated the step fracture. Sometimes you'll see me hit the flake, and it's because they tend to stick sometimes. I call it stickiness. Not all materials have flakes that are sticky, but some materials do. What the physics is behind the stickiness is, what is the physics behind the stickiness? What causes it? I don't know. I'm doing this out of order. I think I was going to do that last. I was going to do this before that one. But that's okay. This didn't go anywhere anyway. I think it's better that I take off material that's closer to the end than directly in the middle. Anyway. Yeah. Alright, let's see. That was good. This is starting to get pitted and lumpy, so let me grind it. These hits are becoming more and more important, so the tools have to be more and more refined and more taken care of as the progression advances toward the final stages. Everything has to be more persnickety, in other words, as you reach the final stages. Okay. Did it work? Yes. Now see, it went a little further than I thought. It is breaking up toward the end, which is okay. But I just have to keep it in mind that it will do that more and more often. It'll be all crunchy and crackly at the ending of the flake as it gets thinner and thinner. As this gets thinner and thinner, the flakes get thinner and thinner. Okay, and this gets lighter and lighter. So there's some changes that happen during this stage. This is getting lighter, so you're going to have to hit slightly harder to get the same length of flake as I did for the previous flake. I lost mass on the previous flake. I'm using the mass of the workpiece against itself. So when it gets lighter, I have to hit slightly harder. But the subtleties are almost imperceptible, and my subconscious takes care of that. The only way that I know this is what happens is because I've studied my actions very, very closely. Okay, so that I know that I am actually hitting harder as it gets thinner. In many cases. Sometimes I don't need to hit harder because it's actually getting smaller too, or more narrow. You don't have to hit as hard to get a longer flake. Sometimes it balances out. But if the width stays the same, you're definitely going to need to hit harder to get the same length if you're using the mass of the workpiece against itself. Now, if you've got support behind it, if you're using support, it's a little bit different than my style of knapping. So my style of knapping may not work for you if you are trying to support this and hit more slowly. Okay? All right, so I'm going to be thinning this tip down more because it needs to be thinned a lot more in order for the middle to be much thicker. Right now it's pretty much the same here and here. That's not a good thing on something that'll snap in half. It feels to me like this is very snap in half-ish. So I've got to make sure the middle is very thick compared to the ends. Thicker than normal. Okay. How well is this knapping? This is knapping, let's say, much better than floor tile or toilet tank, even though that's what it looks like. It's knapping better than those two materials. I would say it's knapping at about a 5 or 6 on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as flakeability, whereas floor tile and toilet tank, it averages about 4 or 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as flakeability. And this might even be even better than a 6. I haven't pressure flaked this yet, so we'll see. It may pressure flake nicely. I haven't tried it. Although percussion, indirect percussion and pressure flaking do yield very similar types of flakes, I still need to pressure flake it to be absolutely sure that it's going to be nice to flake, or before I can say that it's flaking well. Okay. So far, so good. It's not bad. It's not a bad material. It doesn't seem to be taking its toll on the tools. It's very easy on the tools as far as I can tell. I don't need to abrade this that much to clean it up. Now this is going to take me longer than normal because I'm trying to explain everything. Some people are very conscious about how long it's taking. And if they take a shorter amount of time than I'm taking right now, they might think that they're doing something wrong. No, you can take a shorter amount of time than I'm taking because I'm delaying a lot of this because I'm trying to explain it. All right. Very good. That was a good one. But again, it's breaking up toward the end. I got to keep that in mind for the final thinning. This is the preliminary thinning. There's 2 stages of thinning during the thinning process. Preliminary, which is just easier than the final thinning. I divide it into stages because I feel like it's a different mindset. The preliminary thinning will get you a biface that can be used as a tool, but it's not going to be as thin as it could be. It's not going to be as thin as the potential. You know, it's not going to be fulfilling its full potential on the preliminary thinning. The final thinning really takes advantage, or really puts it to the test of how thin it can go. To be safe, I should stop thinning here soon. Because if there's a lot of mistakes like that, step fracture, it is a mistake. If there's a lot of these, when it's thin, after this preliminary thinning, it's going to be hard to get rid of those. So if I get rid of them during the preliminary thinning, I should just leave it and keep it thick. All right. If I'm finding it difficult to remove those, that's one reason to stop thinning. But right now, I don't think it's going to be difficult to remove that. But if it becomes difficult, then I have to say to myself, okay, I'm reaching the potential of the stone, or my skill, or both. And this operation here, the tip, is something that I still work on. Many times I will break the tip off because actually the tip is also a different mindset. They didn't travel all the way. The tip is a different mindset than the rest of the piece. You know, I've been saying for a while that I should develop a whole new tool set or different tool set just for tips. But I tend to try to do everything with the minimum amount of tools. It will probably be better if I develop a different set of tools just for the tips. Yeah, I've been saying that for a long time, and I just haven't done it. It's one of those things that it kind of interrupts the flow of the knapping. If I have to, in the middle of the 2 stages of thinning, I have to get out my second set of tools just for the tip, break the mojo, do the tip, and then get back into the preliminary and secondary thinning stages. So that's probably one reason why I don't do it. The other reason is I don't want a lot of tools in my toolbox. But I probably should do it and just deal with it. Figure out how to make tools either that are more versatile or lighter in weight or small. Something to prevent my toolkit from getting too big and physically heavy. Okay. Do I think about all that stuff while I'm knapping? No, I don't. But some people may wonder why I'm using the same tool for the tip when it's a different mindset than the rest of the piece. I'm using it because I'm trying to get away with the least amount of tools possible. And why don't I switch to a smaller flaker? Again, because I don't want to be switching too much. I like to keep the same tool in use for as long as possible. I'll switch toward the end and be more persnickety in the very final thinning and very final sharpening. But not right now. This is still what I call the preliminary thinning. Secondary thinning, I'm going to have to be a lot more careful. If I decide I want to go to the secondary thinning, which I might not, because I don't want to break this. But if I do go to the secondary thinning, I have to be a lot more careful. And I'll probably switch to a smaller diameter rod. This one right now is a 3/8. I'll switch to a 5/16. I do have smaller rods than that as far as diameter, but they usually bend too much because I end up hitting really hard even at the final thinning stages. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't see a good opportunity to remove that step fracture. I want to remove it first before I go to the middle thickness. I want to remove that step fracture first because if I don't, it's going to rear its ugly head as an obstacle that's much more difficult to remove without risk. If it's thin in the middle and I hit up here, it's risky. Yeah. From experience. It may not be, but in my experience, it feels risky to try to remove this obstacle after I remove this mass in the middle. I do want to reduce it more because it does look way too thick for my taste. But I don't want to. I don't want to remove that first because from experience, like I said, it would seem too risky. And it's not a really big deal except for the fact I only have one of these pieces, and I'm trying to do a demonstration video or a tutorial. Okay, so this edge doesn't look strong enough, so I got to be more persnickety about strengthening it. I don't have much range of motion, range of angle, and I don't have that many chances to remove it. I got one chance here from this point to flake into that area. See, it's convex. It's actually flat, but it's good enough. It needs to either be flat or convex into the obstacle. I'm assuming the flake's going to travel past this hump and into this area here, which should clear out the entire step fracture when I hit. Okay, it may not. It may stop right there, in which case, and this flake here would hopefully remove it if I take a flake into this direction later. Do I always have a plan B? Nope. Sometimes all I see is one opportunity, and that's it. I take the opportunity, and then if it doesn't work, then I go, oh man, I got to create some other way to do it, because I don't see any other way. Let's figure out, maybe I have to remove some width to create a tough spot or a strong area to nap into it, as an example. Anyway, this I use it in two ways. One to dull it, and the other to flake the edge with very tiny flakes. I call it hammer stoning when I use this to flake with. I brush and hit at the same time. It not only brushes like this, but it hits. The hits remove flakes. The brushing removes little granules. I don't call them flakes, but they probably technically are flakes. Those little granules. Okay. So that felt like it didn't work at all. It just took a superficial flake off. I can probably move over just a little bit and try again. Let's see. No, it did take a flake. Did it scoop it? Yeah, it scooped it. All right. So it did take some off the top, but it also scooped it. That's not good. Let's see. See, I took off another flake right there, and it did bang into that step fracture, and luckily it did remove it. Now that works on fragile material. It doesn't work that well on tough material. You know, I was hoping it would bang into that flake, because it didn't seem like it was difficult to remove. So I'll say, okay, I can take a flake up here and bang into that step fracture, and luckily it did remove a smooth area, or it did result in a smooth area from that removal. Luckily, because sometimes it will do that, but it'll be all crackly and it won't look great. This one looked pretty smooth. So it didn't remove all of it, but it's okay. It's lower. I can reach it much easier from the side, from this side now. Yeah, but it still doesn't look strong enough. So I'm going to move this edge, make it stronger. Now I gotta also, so the tip is thin enough. Later I've got to make the base thinner as well. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. The next obstacle, of course, is this right there. I might thin the base first before I take this flake, but for sure I needed to move this further in so I can toughen this edge, because it didn't look tough enough or strong enough to support a long enough flake here. I have to hit it very, very hard. It's very, very light. In order to make a large flake, I need a strong edge. Luckily, I had plenty of width here so that when I take material off, it results in a strong edge. If I didn't have any width or didn't have much width, removing just a little bit of the edge to try to create a strong edge probably won't work. I do need lots of width in order to create a strong edge from the removal of the edge. Maybe I should try to remove a flake before I move on to the next segment. Let's see. And then we can start the next segment without that obstacle. Maybe? Let's see. Now I got to decide whether I want to take a flake from this area or this area. It does make a difference. Sometimes if I take a flake from this area, it'll fan out enough so I don't have to take two flakes. This one I'm going to have to take two flakes, one here and one here, to get rid of this mass. I might be able to get rid of the mass in one strike, but it's probably going to be dicey to try to get both this mass and that mass removed from this flake. Because it's small, I need to hit it very, very hard. It's very, very brittle, and it might not travel all the way, so I don't know. Let me see. What would I normally do? I'd probably take off more width. Yeah. Get closer to the obstacle, but I'm going to leave it like that, and I'm going to strike here first. It wasn't strong enough to support the flake I wanted. Yeah, so let's try this. That's a very, very hard hit. It didn't fan out like I thought. I do have an opportunity to take another flake along this ridge. Let's see. But I'm starting to run out of options. Let's see. I slipped. It slipped downward before I struck it. So I missed a strong part of that edge. That's another reason why I don't make platforms, because sometimes the flaker will slip off or don't make specific isolated striking areas, because sometimes the flaker will slip. And if there's nothing on either side, that slip is just going to mess everything up. But if there's a continuous striking area and it slips a little bit, it still might work. That did not work. That did not work either. I have a feeling I'm going to have to make it more narrow. Yeah. Trying to do this and not make it too narrow, but let's see. Yeah, it might be a tough spot. It seems a lot harder right there. Yeah, see, it's not cooperating whatsoever. All right, I'm going to end it there, and I'll continue on the next segment.